Welcome, everyone. I'm once again delighted and grateful that you made the time to be here today. Our topic of conversation today is about how to use the Disney creativity strategy as a creative problem solving process to create ideas and possibilities for our coaching clients. I would like you to consider some questions. Have you ever wanted a technique that is easy to use to create possibilities, ideas, and alternatives for your coaching clients? Have you ever wanted to look at the way you coach from a new perspective and come up with new ideas to maintain your competitive edge? Do you need techniques and approaches to keep your coaching fresh, new, and innovative? I will attempt to answer some of these questions for you today. I've recently had a session with a coach that I used to work with many years ago as a coaching client. And I thought it might be a good idea to revisit some ideas for challenges that I'm going through at the moment. And I thought that this coach would be a good option since we worked together well in the past. It wasn't enlightening, but also unsatisfying experience. And I came away from that session with some interesting observations. He still used the same coaching structure he used 15 years ago. He still used the same metaphors and stories. His process, his approach were exactly the same as in the past. In catching up after the session, in conversation, it seemed to me that the majority of his clients were still the same people he worked with when I worked with him so many years ago. And he also admitted that it was becoming harder and harder to find new clients. Looking at these observations objectively, there were a few questions in my mind. I wondered if it was a good idea to use the same structure, process, and approach for as long as he has. And I thought there might be some merit in the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or not. My old coach found a recipe that worked for him and he still uses it. But is this the right way? Or has he fallen into the laziness of habitual thinking and did not evolve as a coach? I also wondered how it is possible to keep on working with the same clients year after year. Should part of the growth that we create for our clients not be to set them free to continue their growth beyond what we can do for them? Or did those clients also get stuck in their habitual thinking to stay with him as a coach? And the problems he had in attracting new clients, it were less about the external circumstances, but rather about his failure to grow and adapt his skills. Could it be? And should we as coaches not continuously evolve to accommodate new ways of working, new techniques, new stories, and new approaches? In revisiting this old coach of mine, it made me remember a story I heard years ago. And it goes like this. A prospective student went to a Zen master and said, "If I work very hard, how soon can I be enlightened?" The Zen master looked him up and down and said, 10 years. The student said, No, 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 listen. I mean, if I really work at it, how long will it take? The Zen master paused and eventually answered, Then it'll take you 20 years. Wait, said the young student, you don't understand. I am willing to dedicate everything I am to this. And the Zen master looked at me and said, Then it'll take 30 years. And in a way, I feel coaching sometimes is a little like this story. The choice of becoming a great coach lies somewhere between working hard and working hard at it. And for me, constant inquiry and continuous renewal is part of the way to becoming a great coach. The Disney creativity strategy is a creative thinking technique that you may integrate into your coaching conversations to help your coaching clients develop ideas, possibilities, and alternatives. It is also a technique we as coaches can use for ourselves to develop new ideas and approaches for our own coaching process. But before we jump in, let's look at the structure of today's conversation. To start with, I would like to discuss the topic of creative thinking. As coaches, we are focused on helping our clients move towards new thinking and expanding possibilities for themselves. It is also necessary to take a creative eye and look inwards towards ourselves and our own processes to make sure that it stays fresh and that we don't limit our own growth and expansion in this role that we chose. Then I would like to quickly revisit the coaching conversation for the benefit of repetition and for the new visitors that did not hear about it in our previous session. We will then learn the background of the Disney creativity strategy and what is possible when you use it as part of your coaching process. We will then have a practical experience of the Disney creative process in a short exercise before we have a quick Q&A session to wrap up things for the day. Let us start with a general question. What is creative thinking and why do we need it? Creative thinking is a way of looking at problems or situations from a fresh or different perspective that suggests new and unusual solutions. Creative thinking can be stimulated by an unstructured process or by a structured process. An example of an unstructured process is brainstorming, where we come up with loose and informal ideas to create many possible solutions for a problem situation. A structured process follows a set flow and often uses induced frames of reference to create viewpoints and its associated thinking perspectives. The Disney creativity strategy is an example of a structured process. But why do we need creative thinking at all? Over time, our brains tend to fall into shortcuts because of the phenomenon of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to organize and reorganize itself by forming neural connections. And habitual thinking and behavior over time causes myelin to form around the nerve cell axons and insulate it, increasing the rate at which electrical impulses pass along the neural path. So, over time, habitual thinking happens faster and faster. The net effect is that we become very good at what we habitually do. And it doesn't matter whether that what we do is positive or negative. Repetition and consistent thinking is a great way to form and strengthen expertise and skills, but it also constrains us because the downside is that over time it becomes more and more challenging to break out of our thinking patterns and behavior. As coaches, we often see clients stuck in behavioral patterns because of their fixed and systematic thinking. Or we see those clients who have been retrenched and are in crisis because they never bothered to update their thinking, their skills, and their ways of work to stay relevant. It is easy to fall into this trap as coaches as well. My old coach is an example of someone who found a formula that works and then got stuck in it. And he may very well become obsolete unless he changes his growth path. Creativity is our ability to form something new and different from what is known and from what we habitually do. It is about developing thinking that looks for different solutions and new ways of working continuously. And it's not about change for the sake of change. but instead focusing on what is new and different and how it can serve us best in our growth or not. Because creative thinking also includes noticing what is new and different, evaluating it, and knowing when it would not serve us. By making a habit of creativity, it creates freedom, it increases our self awareness, and it creates confidence for us. Following our creative path makes us less susceptible to bowing to the judgment and the criticism of others, and it frees us up to experiment and try out unorthodox ideas that are novel. It expands our thinking based on our thoughts, our feelings, and our insights instead of relying on others' thoughts and beliefs, which also results in us being authentic in what we do. In following our creative path, we also allow ourselves to build confidence in our ideas, which over time forms the foundation of our contribution to the world. Now, as coaches, we encourage this in our clients, and we should pay attention to it as well for ourselves. The coaching conversation that I present here has 6 stages. An opening where you meet the client where they are, gain rapport and trust, and follow up on what actions they've completed since the previous session. I also use the opening to facilitate the client to a state in which they are open and accepting of creative thinking and creating ideas and possibilities for themselves. And I do this by simply following the next 2 steps. I start with setting an intention. And then I move on to facilitating what I call the coach state. The setting of intention is a crucial step. Intention creates for you the window through which the client views the work. In our previous session, we discussed how positive states and positive intention is more likely to lead to positive outcomes. And of course, acceptance of the change needed for the coaching client. If we delve a little deeper in intention, let me give you some examples. For example, if you wake up in the morning and you think to yourself, oh, another week under lockdown. I'm so sick and tired of this. If you start with that kind of frame, you pretty much guarantee yourself to have a bad experience in that day or in the week that follows. However, if you set a positive intention, and let me give you an example of that, waking up on a Monday morning and then consciously saying to myself, I am really curious and excited about all the things that's going to come my way this week. Then you are going to have a very different experience of that day and, of course, that week than you had if you accepted the first intention. In every coaching session, once I've gained my rapport and I've gotten the small talk out of the way, the first constructive thing that I do is always to set intention. And I make sure that it's a positive intention, because positive intention creates positive action. Positive action creates positive change. Then the next step is to facilitate the client to a state of presence and open awareness. And I use a technique that I've shared with some of you in previous sessions, which is called the coach state. I will quickly teach you how to set up this specific technique, but you can use any kind of grounding exercise to bring your clients to a present and open awareness state. So the coach state is just one technique. And it's a technique that I learned from my teachers, Stephen Gilligan and Robert Dilts, as part of their generative approach to coaching. The word coach is an acronym. And the C stands for centered, centered in your body. The O is for open, open to whatever may arise. The A is for aware, aware of your senses and what's going on around you. The second C is for connected, connected to the resources that you have within you, and of course, the other resources that are available to you around you. And the H is for holding the space for yourself, and of course, holding it for whoever you invite into that space. So what I'll do is I will quickly give you a demonstration of how I normally facilitate the coach state. So I'm going to ask you to, wherever you are in this moment, sitting down in a chair, being supported adequately, to just do this little exercise with me. And the extent to which you will surrender to this exercise will also give you an idea of how useful a technique this could be for you. So as you sit in your chair and you feel how the chair supports you below your legs and against your back, I would like you to just start with a deep breath in and out. And take another deep breath in and out. And then just notice, as you are breathing, you can almost consciously send your breath anywhere in your body. So on your next breath in, just feel the air going into your lungs and out. And on your next breath, breathe into your heart. And just feel what that feels like. And just breathe into that space around your heart a couple of times. And on your next breath in, just breathe all the way down to where you feel your center to be. And just keep on breathing into that space where you feel centered. For a lot of people, it's a space that's about 2 fingers below their belly button. But you know better where your center is. It's that space where you really feel like you are present in your body, feeling centered. Now, I'd like you to be open to whatever may arise in the session together. Often, when we are in sessions of learning or sessions of coaching, there's feelings, there's emotions that come up, or sometimes even images. And I would like you to welcome it, because these things arise to teach us. And I want you to be aware of everything you perceive through all of your senses in this moment. Everything you hear, everything you smell. If your eyes are open, you can still see what's around you. If your eyes are closed, you can look with the eyes of the imagination, and you can be aware of how the air feels on your skin in this moment. And I want you to connect to all the resources and strengths you have. But not only to your resources, but also the resources that are available around you. Those people and things you can rely on every day in this moment. And then lastly, I want you to hold this space, this safe space. Hold it for yourself and for anyone that you invite into it. And then just take one more deep breath in and out. And maybe stretch your body a little bit. And if your eyes were closed, you can just open it and be here now. Welcome. And that's just a simple demonstration of a technique that I would use to bring a client into this present moment. And it's very important to bring a client to present moment because a lot of the time they spend so much effort on a constructed memory that happened somewhere in the past, or they are so focused on a projected future that they spend almost no time in this moment, the present moment. And as a consequence, they never really experience the world as it is and the way that they can think in this moment to create a better future for themselves. Now, once the client is in a state that readies them for coaching, we move to the next stage, which is contracting. And this is where we will agree on the outcome of the session. In the Disney creativity strategy, this outcome is really important because all of the work is done around it. And we continuously revisit this outcome. Now, often the client will show up with a presenting issue or a developmental idea which they want to work with in the session based on the preparation work they do before the session. I will typically spend a couple of minutes on unpacking this issue or this idea that they have, and we will negotiate the appropriate outcome for which we have a scope that we can achieve in the duration of the session. We will also focus very carefully on setting up the outcome to be structured as a positive statement. And we do this by constructing the outcome as firstly something that the client wants and that is compelling enough that it will actually draw them towards it. I never coach someone that says to me, I don't want to be like this. And if someone says that to me, I will always say to them, what would you rather be like? And it holds with the whole approach into positive thinking and positive psychology that you want to move people towards where they should end up rather than to get them to flee away from a situation they don't want to be in. Once we agree and we've constructed this outcome to be positive, we move into exploring. And this is where we gather information about the issue or the idea, and we start generating possible resolutions. We will also talk through the most likely ideas and explore which will offer the best solution. The exploring stage is also where we implement the use of our creativity and creative thinking techniques to enable the generation of many new ideas and to expand possibility and awareness for our clients. Then in actioning, the client commits to an action plan, which they will pursue beyond the coaching session. And then we give the client an opportunity to share their insights. And then finally, in closing, we will wrap up the session. What I normally do is I will confirm the commitments that the client has made, tie those commitments to a larger purpose, and then also prepare the client to live in an optimum state. In talking about the Disney creativity strategy, I want to start with the words of Walt Disney himself, who said, "Somehow I can't believe that there are any heights that can't be scaled by a man who knows the secrets of making dreams come true. This special secret, it seems to me, can be summarized in 4 C's. They are curiosity, confidence, courage, and constancy. And the greatest of all is confidence. When you believe in a thing, believe in it all the way, implicitly and unquestionable." The Disney creativity strategy was inspired by Walt Disney, who had an incredible talent for discovering creative ideas and converting them into reality. That doesn't mean that Walt Disney was always the easiest person to work with. An associate of Walt used to say, there were 3 different Walts: the dreamer, the realist, and the spoiler. And you never knew which one was coming to the meeting. In 1994, Robert Dilts modeled Walt Disney's creativity strategy based on anecdotal evidence about how Walt used to work and think. Central to the modeling approach was defining a technique that could be used by anyone to turn ideas into reality. The Disney creativity strategy relies on a process that bridges the gap between imagination and reality. And it's a technique that is very appropriate for the practice of coaching. Before we discuss the different roles of the Disney creativity strategy, let's quickly talk about the concept of perceptual positions. Some of you who may have received NLP, neuro-linguistic programming training in the past, may have touched on perceptual positions and the power of that concept. And it simply is this: it is the ability to take another position outside of the first person view you usually hold. It is a useful ability to develop and cultivate and explore a range of positions you may not normally consider. And it is useful in any situation where understanding another person's opinion or point of view holds value. For example, in our previous session yesterday, I had a conversation with one of our fellow coaches on the value of choosing a niche. Now, the first thing to understand about your niche is who is your audience and what do they want. To know what they want, you have to have the ability to step into their shoes and look into the world as they would. And that's what we mean broadly with the concept of perceptual positions. As an ability, it expands your thinking and it expands your awareness. And this ability is vital in the Disney creativity strategy, where you will be expected to step into the shoes of 4 different roles, which is separated from each other by the view, the attitude, and the questions each role has to pose and answer. And of course, when you use this with your coaching client, it relies on them having that ability as well. In the Disney creativity strategy, there are 4 roles that we want the coaching client to investigate. The four roles are the dreamer, the realist, the critic, and the analyst. And what we do is, in the coaching conversation, the coaching client will step into each of these positions in turn and assume the attitudes of that position exclusively. So, for example, the dreamer is the role that creates ideas, thoughts, and possibilities. As the dreamer, the coaching client focuses on what they want with a passion and enthusiasm. There are no restrictions, there are no evaluations of ideas, there are no judgments, there are no criticisms that are allowed. So it's purely about generating ideas and possibilities. And the intention is to build a list of creative ideas that create possibilities for the coaching client in terms of the outcome that they want to achieve. The coach will be responsible for keeping the stream of ideas alive and immediately intervening when the coaching client judges or criticizes themselves. Then we move to the role of the critic. The critic thinks about discovering the barriers of implementing specific ideas and how to overcome the barriers. It is about finding a constructive critique to find weak points in an idea and to solve it. It is not about being dismissive or judgmental about the ideas. So, this is where the coach has to be very aware, because they are then responsible for managing the client to do an in-depth evaluation of the weak points of the ideas and to stop the client from negative self-talk and criticism. So, for example, as a coach, you will not allow a client to say, oh, this is a bad idea, I'm not going to go with it. Instead, what you will do is, okay, explain to me why it's a bad idea and what you would need to do to make it a good idea. So the whole idea, the whole foundation that the coach works from is to create a generative environment in which you strengthen even the ideas that are less than optimal. Then we get to the realist. The realist evaluates ideas and options in terms of viability. So when the client steps into the role of the realist, they will test each idea in terms of how viable is this to execute. And the coach will be responsible for making sure that the options for implementation is thought through and is evaluated properly. And then we get to the last role in this process, which is the analyst, and it's a meta role. And what the analyst role allows the client to do is to just take a step back from the positions of dreamer, critic, or realist and almost have a view from afar on whether this process is working and whether they are working towards achieving the outcome that they've set for themselves. It is also an opportunity for the client to step back and say, you know what, I've worked through the dreamer, the critic, and the realist, but I think I need to go back to dreamer because I've just thought of some more ideas. Or I want to go back to critic because I need to go and work on some of the weaker points of this idea, which suddenly looks to me like a great idea. So let's look at the process next. The Disney creativity strategy is an excellent exercise if you can do it in person. And it's particularly effective if you can sort of practice it as a spatial process. And what I've done in the past, if I did this process in person, we actually map out the different roles as physical positions on the floor. And we take the opportunity to anchor each part somatically with the client. So we would even tell the client to assume a certain body position if you are playing the role of a dreamer. assume a different body position if you are playing the role of the critic, and so on. In the virtual coaching situation, you may have to improvise and use a more imaginative internal process, although the somatic anchoring of the different roles is still a valuable opportunity. As you are working over Zoom or over an audio channel, you could still ask your client to assume a certain position or a certain attitude. To prepare for the process, you can facilitate the client through anchoring and adopting each role with its mindset. So, with other words, you want to practice with them. This is what you are going to be like when you are playing the role of the dreamer. This is what you're going to be like if you play the role of the realist. And you might even go as far as giving them examples. Once the client understands what each role does and what the coach does, you can start the process. And we always start in the analyst role. And from that meta role, we revisit the stated outcome for the session. And that we do so that we can really focus the client on what it is that they want to achieve. Once we've done that, we enter the dreamer role. And here is where the coach will fulfill the role of the facilitator and the cheerleader. The client is responsible for generating ideas, options, and possible solutions for realizing their outcome. The coach will do what is needed to do to keep the idea stream flowing through questions and positive support. And you maintain this right up to the point where the client starts running out of ideas. A client going quiet doesn't mean they are out of ideas. It might just mean that they are thinking about another idea. But in reading your client, you will notice when they get to the point where there's just no immediate thought of the next idea. And then together you can decide whether you want to go back to analyst role and revisit the outcome, or you can decide to proceed to the role of the critic. In the critic role, the client focuses on discovering the barriers of implementing their idea. They focus on finding the weak points and how to overcome it. So the purpose of the critic is to find what is bad, what is weak, and then how it can be fixed. It's not about criticizing, it's not about being dismissive, it's not about being negative. Often when we start talking about critic, people seem to think that is where we go negative. It's not. The coach here is responsible for managing the client to do those in-depth evaluations, to stop judgment, to stop the negative self-talk and to stop the criticism, and refocusing them on finding the weak spots and finding the solutions for the weak spots. So it still remains a very generative process. And when the client has worked through each of the ideas, it's time to move on. So what I'm saying is that you will take all of the ideas that were generated in the dreamer state or dreamer role, and then one by one, you would work through them as a critic and say, okay, these are the weak points. These are the things I need to do to make this a stronger idea. And once you've worked through all of the ideas, then you are done. And then you can either go back, you and the client can either decide to go back to the analyst role, revisit the outcome, or you can proceed to realist. What is interesting about the critic is you also spend a lot of time in figuring out information about the outcome. So sometimes after playing the dreamer role or the critic role or the realist role, you may find that the outcome starts changing as well. If the client suspects that the outcome that they've set for the session is changing because of all of this information that is being uncovered in the process, you go back to analyst, revise it, and then go back into one of the roles that you might want to use to expand that information. If you decide to move on to the realist after working through the ideas critically, This is where the client then evaluates each of the ideas or options in terms of how viable is this for execution. And it's very important that the coach makes sure that the options for implementation is thought through in depth and that it is evaluated well. Once all of the ideas are evaluated, the coach and the client can go back to analyst perspective, consolidate, and then they can decide to either dip into any of the other roles as they need it or to go through the cycle again. And you can cycle through the 3 roles as many times as is necessary for the client to come up with healthy and viable ideas. I quickly want to look at where does the Disney creativity strategy fits into the coaching conversation. And it is a useful tool to use in the exploration stage of the coaching conversation. After we've contracted an outcome with our client, we will move on to exploration. And this is where we will implement the Disney creativity strategy. And we will use it to expand on ideas and options to resolve the outcome for the coaching client. And then what comes out of it is the feedback that goes into the actioning stage, where we then prioritize which actions, which ideas to pursue beyond the coaching session. As you can see, the exploring stage, that's where we use the Disney creativity strategy, and that then feeds back into the action plan. In conclusion, the coaching conversation and the integration of the Disney creativity strategy will provide a useful approach for you and your coaching clients to explore your and their imaginations and way of thinking in the coaching session and beyond. And I would encourage all of you to explore this approach for yourself first. Practice it. See the possibility that it opens up for you first. And once you get comfortable with it, decide whether you want to use this in your coaching sessions. And even if you decide not to use this technique in your coaching sessions, I hope you will be motivated in bringing creative thinking and innovation into your coaching practice as not to end up where my old coach did. And I hope that you will recognize the need for constant innovation and change, and that you are committed to being and continually becoming a great coach.